41 in here. We were expecting like 7 people and a dog, to be honest. So this is already like.
And you were bringing the dog.
First.
Right. Does everyone know how to use Zoom?
No.
Okay. Consider it a baptism of fire then. If you just want to, we've got the chat. You should be able to find the Zoom chat. If people just want to put in a bio, just who they are, where they're from, what they're currently doing. Obviously, we've got a large number of people, so we're going to try and streamline it a little bit. And we'll try and use the chat rather than us actually physically talking, or, well, we'll talk, but everyone else talking. We'll try and use the chat interactive while we're going. Makes sense.
Mark, I like your background, fella.
I just had to make it a lot more exciting than the tail. Plus, the reality of my situation is freaking snow.
Yeah, so for recruitment purposes, you need to change the background to make it more appealing.
Just general, for my own purposes. I mean, look at this.
Wow.
It's Saturday. It all fell yesterday.
Are you locked in as well over there or not?
Yeah. I haven't. I've seen one other person for the last week and a half.
Is that normal for you?
It's one more than usual.
Happy birthday, Rob. Birthday boy. Can't hear what you said. Will, do you want to kick off with some sort of introduction-y bit about how to use it? And we want to wait a little bit longer. I think there's still a few more loading.
I think crack on.
Yeah, I'll look after the stragglers.
Are you not going to put the PowerPoint up?
I am. All right, can we all see that?
Yeah.
Super.
Al,
Yeah.
how do I message everyone on the group?
I think Will's going to run through a demo now or explain.
Lovely. I can only message Mark at the moment. I'm just abusing his silly accent.
There should be a drop down which should allow you to select it. I've muted everyone, so hopefully we can crack on. Elliot's going to put the slideshow up, hopefully. Can you continue doing that, El, or do you want me to do it?
You haven't even got it, have you?
No, but I would have to control your screen, wouldn't I?
There you go.
Right, okay. Thank you everyone for coming. There's 47 of us at the moment, which is amazing, but obviously brings with it its own issues. So just sort of rules of engagement, I suppose. We're going to try and keep it mute to start with, rattle through what we've got prepared in terms of pitch shape, sizes, player numbers, that sort of stuff. Can people use the chat box? Obviously, we've started to get people putting in who they are, what they're doing in there, which is fantastic. So familiarise yourself with that if you're curious about people. Can we use that for any sort of questions as we're going along, and maybe having a dialogue between each other? All participants just throw questions in there, answer yourselves, that sort of stuff. Then once we've covered the goal scoring, we're going to break people off into different rooms just to discuss certain things. Elliot will send a link out to some videos. And really, you know, the focus, as far as we're concerned, is trying to have as much of a technical and a tactical element in terms of how we construct games or practices as possible, which I think at times can be forgotten. So we're going to go through some of the nuance of that, and really we'll give you our thoughts, but when we go into the breakout room, we want it to be free forum for you in small groups to discuss that. Anyway, just blown away by the numbers, and hopefully we can all get a lot out of it. So what we did in the form that you got sent out was, what are you looking for today? So this is, do you want to talk about practice design?
Yeah. So part of the thought process behind this whole sort of saga was that obviously we've done there's a lot of talk at the minute about practice design and lots of good stuff out there in terms of coach behaviours and shaping coach behaviours. And one of the things that me and Will wanted to try and drive forward was this idea of how you elicit behaviours from your design. So before you even have to put anything into your practice as a coach, before you have to set any questions, any tasks, award any points, anything like that, how you can plan your session to elicit certain behaviours and encourage things to happen, if that makes sense. And what you've got on the screen is just a little dial, it's just a bit of visual representation of some of the things that we are looking to tweak and set up to change behaviours. So in particular, looking at pitch size, team numbers, start positions, how you can use those to encourage technical shaping. Does that make sense? Oh, you're all muted, aren't you?
You won't get much of a response from people that are muted.
Anything else to add, Will?
No, I think that's good. Keep going.
Right, it's over to you.
Oh, right, brilliant. I was just looking at something else, but okay. Yeah, so I think this is one of the quite. I'll come at it again. One of the methods I use is step principle, which is quite an old school PE way of manipulating your games or your practices to try and get different responses. So traditionally, step with space, task, equipment, players. Times an important control I would use. So if we go on to the next slide. Yeah. Go on to the next slide. Thank you. So these are my factors affecting ball carry. Now they, I would say, are linked to the step principle. So by varying either of those sets of constraints, I will be able to, or hopefully I'll be able to manipulate the environment so that it elicits a different technical or tactical response from players. So thinking about how the use of space, the use of time frame, different equipment. We were speaking about this actually earlier, weren't we, in terms of looking at rebounds and changing the ball, so it's going to get more bobbly stuff going on in the circle. But constantly tweaking these to elicit the adaptation that we might be after or we might think we're after. I think what's really important is that the manipulation of your exercise and your practices comes from the context within the game. So if I'm trying to create a practice which will elicit a lot of, which again we'll touch on when we get to goal scoring, ball striking within a circle, then I don't really want a heavily congested circle, because I need to take the ball away to space to strike it, to take my stick off the ball. So keep thinking around how you dial these things up and down to elicit an appropriate technical adaptation from your players.
Yeah, and I think if we sort of move on now to pitch design, just a few ideas around this, and the simplest form is for us just to sort of talk through some ideas. By using different pitch shapes, so if we were to use the red outline here as a pitch space, you'd encourage different behaviours, and the way that you set this up and the way that you locate this on the pitch would encourage different outcomes naturally. So for example, if we were to use that space to attack into, we're not going to be working on left-sided circle entries because the left side of the circle is cut off the pitch. So naturally, the players have to work on right-sided circle entries. If we were to start our ball position from the halfway line, as opposed to the sideline, again, we gain different responses from that.
And I think in there, Elliot, if you just go back, sorry, to that triangle, yeah. If you're looking from a technical point of view, the pitch space that you've set up there, and this is why the location is key, not just the shape of the pitch. If we were to play in that triangle there, we're more likely to see a lot of forehand goal scoring work than backhand, because we're removing that left-hand side where a lot of the space would come from to be able to use my backhand. So we're creating that defensive barrier. So we'll see a lot more forehand skills.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think it's important you think of it from a defence and attack perspective. So again, if we were to have a thin shape down the centre of the circle, we would be rewarding a lot of this top of the circle entry and probably a lot of deep goal scoring opportunities, as opposed to wide, long passes outside the circle, baseline carrying. So it's just by trying to manipulate what space you actually plan to use gives you a different outcome for the players.
In there, those long narrow spaces, particularly around the circle, will lead to quite a lot of elimination in tight space as well, rather than passing, because we don't necessarily have much width. We'll have to try and manipulate the height of the pitch to create outcome around the top of the circle.
Whereas if we were to have a wider pitch like that, what you would end up with, if there's a one-on-one duel at the top of the circle, they're not forced to play through that and go through towards a circle. They can actually pass around the outside if they're in a wider space. So again, this just rewards naturally different ideas. Do you want to talk about your bottleneck, Will?
Yeah, I've got the screen, I think. Okay, so I should have. Yeah. So one thing we've spoken about before, fans of Will et al. On YouTube, is in our ball carry the use of this is certainly one that I like to use, the use of a bottleneck shape. Basically because removing the element of straight lines and taking sort of a chunk out the middle of the pitch stops forward passes straight. So it forces passes to go diagonal, which is obviously through a lot more congestion. Therefore, it's going to create much more difficulty in terms of passing forward. So it would lead to more opportunity, or more of a focus on opportunity to carry forward. I think it's really important just to think about relative numbers as well when we're talking about these shapes, because if I do this as this is sort of shown with quite a narrow bottleneck, if I have too high numbers in there, all that we end up getting is defense trying to outlet or try to play under pressure in a very congested circle, or stepping out and pressing quite high in there, because this stops play too much for it to actually elicit the right response. So whereas, something happened to my screen. Whereas if I open it slightly more, I've got that, yeah. If I open it slightly more, then actually we can still have more normal play occur, but it's just taking some of those elements of forward passes away. So think about the balance. If we have these spaces quite narrow, we've got to make sure the numbers are right to elicit the appropriate response. If you want to look at playing under quite a lot of pressure centrally through the circle, then load it with numbers. That's absolutely fine if that's what you're looking for. But being really savvy and purposeful in terms of how the shape and numbers will impact the nuance of the game.
And then to sort of cheat ahead of the goal scoring perspective, if we talk about goal-to-goal games very briefly, so if we set up a game, which you've probably all seen before, very simple cage game with, say, a narrow pitch outline, what happens in here is we try and get lots of repetitions in here for technical shaping. And I think that it's important that when you're within your planning, you're working out what is it that I'm looking to encourage in behaviour, because in that situation, yes, it's very chaotic. Yes, it can represent lots of aggressive goal scoring opportunities to develop certain techniques. So clip hitting, first time finishing, all those sorts of things. However, as we've sort of spoken about before, you end up in a situation where you have 2 goals to shoot at instantly without any ball carry, without necessarily any pressure onto you. How realistic is that of a game situation? So if you're working with a top end team, Premier League team in the tail end of the season, is that the behaviour you want to see there? Or would that be something you look to encourage at the start of the season, where you might be looking to encourage more exploration and more development? So just trying to think about where you place your goals, how you allow the reps to occur within that are important as well. Want me to move on, Will?
Yep, I'm just chatting to Kappa.
So just a thought here again about playing with overload and underload and parity as well. So just thinking about what different numbers give you. So having an overload attack will do the following that says on the screen. Having an underload attack will naturally encourage other behaviours. So if you want to add massive pressure to your goal scoring, having underloaded will encourage much more one-on-one duels and ball carrying, because they'll encounter that more, because there'll be less players for them to pass to. And then likewise, you can underload and overload the defence to create different behaviours as well. And if you pair this with your pitch shapes, you're now getting an idea of, if we're layering in, let's say we're playing in that goal-to-goal game and we're underloaded, and let's say we make it slightly wider perhaps, what we might be trying to encourage here is it might end up being a bit more passing orientated as opposed to turn and bang the ball, if we've got this space to play in, but actually now we pair that with being underload attack, that will elicit certain behaviours different to if we were playing overload attack. I imagine you'd start to see lots more passing and short close range finishing in an overloaded attack situation in that sort of space versus an underloaded attack.
I think I'll repeat myself, probably what we said in our goal scoring video as well here, Elliot. Goal-to-goal games are great, but just keep thinking about what the actual consequence of them is in your practice design. Think about how realistic they are, winning the ball in your own circle and then being able to shoot straight away. And maybe that lack of consequences is not necessarily accurate. So it's great for working with goalies. It's great for getting loads of chaotic rebound situations, but does it create appropriate transition responses for players? Again, you might use it. You might want to play long, thin with just one goal and a turn and burn or something like that. But just think about what the actual impact and consequence of using something like that is, instead of just doing it because it's fun.
Yeah, and I think it's that reps versus consequence, particularly in goal scoring, which we'll come on to later. Goal scoring is a hugely high pressure situation where you only get one go to put it in the goal. So if we are training with 100 reps, obviously that's really, really good to develop creativity and some ideas for these players. But if we just do that as goal scoring and then expect that to replicate into a live game situation, it's just not going to cross over because they're not replicative of each other. And then the flip side of that, which again I think is really interesting, Thomas Tickelman, part of the European Hockey Mentor scheme, he mentioned to us about how we train for critical zones. So are we training, like we were just saying there, going back to this goal-on-goal game, is this a 2-on-2 in a small, tiny box, so there is only 4 players in the circle? So using, again, that small box, are we playing a 2-on-2 in here? If we are, that's not very replicative of the pressure they will face within a game. So they've managed to work out with Thomas and the Dutch Federation that training in 50 to 80 metres squared per player translates into game-like pressure. So being able to critique, sorry, the phone's going off. Being able to manage the numbers that you're playing within a circle. So for example here, playing the dash line, playing on a 7-on-7 in there will give you very game realistic pressure. If you're going to play in a quarter of a pitch here, if you were to use sort of the tail end of that, so I put 100 in for juniors here, that would be 6-on-6. What that will give you is like for like pressure of what you would feel in a critical moment of, say, long corner, high pressure situations where there are lots of players around the circle. And then again here, when you're training within the D, if you're using the 50, it's a sliding scale, it's not one or the other, but it's just trying to get you to think about what space you're trying to account for with your planning and your players. All right.
Again, yeah, I would just, there's some great chat going on, by the way, on the,
Can't see it.
conversation. Yeah, no, it's really good. Great point from Danny around, from a goalkeeping perspective, allowing, if we were to use small Ds in that goal-to-goal game to encourage a longer transition, then allowing the goalies to save outside the small D, but maybe allowing the attackers to score inside. Still keeps goalkeeper full technical decision making, allows them to come and smother. We were talking about, it was Kappa who made the point about having the small Ds to encourage that transition. And then I maybe suggested, well, actually you could shoot from anywhere, but maybe small Ds are more valuable. So it has more variability in terms of what you're actually practicing from a goal scoring point of view. So you're still looking for some smash goals from the top of the circle. But maybe there's more of a pressure to carry out because you want more points. So some really good chat going on in there in terms of using the constraints. I think the big thing for me is just if you're fortunate enough to know people with goalkeeping specialism, or you're working with a goalie coach, really integrate them and work as a team to plan the sessions, because you'll find a much better nuance in terms of your practice, particularly around goal scoring.
Definitely. And then sort of following on from both of these two sort of fitness and ideas, looking at the phases and the rhythm of the game. So a lot of you will have probably done, sort of 3 versus 4 or 4 versus 3 attack versus defense. So 4 players would attack towards this goal, 3 would defend, 1 joins, gives them a ball, and then 4 attack 3 new defenders that come back. So for you then, it's just trying to think about the phases that are involved within that planning. So if we are attacking and we are team 2, we get an attack rep, and then we get off the pitch. If we're team 1, we get 3 of us get a defensive rep, and then we have a defender join us, another player join us, and we get an attacking rep. So it would be defense, attack, and then we get off the pitch. And again, it's trying to manipulate this rhythm and these phases to mimic the game a little bit more. So if we're talking about, let's say, a long corner setup where we are defending a long corner, it might be that actually we have to defend 4 or 5 phases of this corner. So by trying to mimic that within your game planning, so by having multiple phases, multiple ball starts, so it might be, let's say, coach stands behind and sets up long corner, rolls the ball, sets up a long corner, you play the long corner out, coach sets up another long corner, rolls the ball, and you play 4 or 5 phases. What it does is, again, it allows us to train our players in a slightly different way that mimics the game a bit more and mimics that game rhythm and that game tempo.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I quite regularly we use I call them right to attack games, turn and burn games. So if I just take control of your screen.
You've already got it. Yeah.
Have I got it? Yeah, there we go. So I'd be thinking of, let's say, only playing out to the 23 in that space. One team's attacking. The team that's defending, if they carry over, turn and go, but you treat those as like long corner 5-meter restarts, and then you get in loads of repetition without giving a break, with lots of transition, with lots of thought of going from being in possession to being out of possession, and therefore having to do adaptive defensive behavior and self-organization. So there's loads of ways you can play around with that. I probably use it too much, really, just because it's fun. But exactly what I said earlier.
I think what we're trying to get at is all of these are ways that you can plan your session without having even to think about rules or anything like that, points, rewards or anything. Those are the add-on to the end when you can already manufacture lots of constraints. And I personally think it's really powerful if you can have a session where, as a coach, it's already set up and the reaction of the players is what you want from the pitch shape, the numbers, the spacing, the setup of the game, without having to even layer in any rules or any focus. And you just say, we're playing 3-on-3 in this space, go, whatever it might be. And then you naturally get what you're looking for. You're then skipping steps in that sort of session, as opposed to having to try and elicit it and push it through.
And then it's coaching craft, isn't it? Trying to encourage the players to reflect around what different opportunities they now find in the environment. So what these new spaces and shapes and numbers and overload, underload is going to afford them, for want of a less cliched phrase. Obviously, I could go back to the chat we had last night on your ACP one, Elliot. You don't overdo the talking. Maybe it's just encouraging the individuals to think about it and then feed back to their peers. I think it's probably not a bad point to move on.
Yes, so I was just going to say on the end of that, I know that obviously we've spoken there for a good 15 minutes. I know that Will didn't mention at the start, but this is purely just me and Will are doing this because we're both hockey geeks, as most of you are. There's no real intent or ego behind it. We're just trying to help. In terms of our journeys, we've been in isolated or the wilderness, whatever people want to call it, at stages, and we're just trying to help other people. But what we're saying is not gospel. It's not like the law at all. This is just our personal preferences. I know that we have hot debates with certain people in here who think totally opposite, and that's what's great about coaching, is there's not just one way to do it. Goal scoring.
Everyone's do you know what? The first thing I was taught on a coaching course, I think it was my level 1 coaching course, was always progress to a shot. Always progress to a shot at goal, because it will motivate people. I don't know why you have to progress to it. Let's just get on with it.
So the plan for this is we're going to play. I've basically just tagged some goal scoring. These are the sort of 4 categories that me and Will agreed on. There's not a lot we agree on, but this we did. And we still argue a little bit around connection, deflection. What counts as one, what counts as another. But there's some World Cup 2018 men and women goals here. We'll play through the video, and then the idea is that we're going to break out into some rooms for you guys to have some discussion and time away from our very dull, boring voices. So the link, I'll post the link now. Have a watch, and then we'll put you into some groups. Do you want to add a little bit more to that, Will?
Yeah, no. So in the groups, you'll probably be in 4s or 5s. So I think with the numbers we've got, that might be 10, 11 groups, something like that. Watch through the video. You can have 15 minutes in those groups. If someone can share the video, I think, with the group, it might be better. Or if not, you'll just watch it on YouTube. It doesn't really matter. But break out into the groups. You could discuss in general your ideas around goal scoring, or you could maybe focus on one area of goal scoring if that maximizes your time. What we'd quite like to do is at the end of it, if people would like to, a couple of people feedback from what the key points that their groups sort of discussed. And it'd also be great if anyone has come up with any specific practices within that time that might elicit a specific type of goal, thinking about the sort of step stuff that we spoke about, the goal location, pitch size, that sort of stuff. So just be really purposeful with it.
Have you seen the videos or not?
Yeah, we just finished watching them, really. We're just sort of having some ideas about how we can, like, what's needed. So we're looking at deflections mainly, I believe, as a group. And, you know, what we can do to manipulate for D, for example, to encourage those behaviours as much as possible.
Cool.
And then I mentioned about pairing up there's the intention of the forwards in the D to make the space, but it's also, you've got to pair that up with the players on the outside who are feeding it in. They've got to know why they're leading there and where the ball actually needs to go. Rather than, they might be a decoy, whoever's done more in the D.
So I've done stuff around this before where we've had, like, say, 2 safe spaces for attackers. So 2 like free zones where only attackers are allowed in, to then give deliveries into reaction zone, messy area, whatever you guys like to call it, or like side channels, like in and around the injection markers, for example. So again, like 2 players where you can play the ball into fireballs or give deliveries in there, but still keeping it as game realistic and as tight in the D as possible, and a phase of the game where you ban that, to then try and encourage, you know, little lifts, hits, etc. in tight space, but then also increasing the overload with the 2 jokers in those channels.
Yeah, because you've got to have that that delivery has got to have a bit of space for it to sort of, if you're looking at deflections, if you've got those, your free fly zones on the side or on the baseline that are marked out somehow with I did this the other week, performance centre. It's a bit synthetic, but you're getting a carry and a look and a flip into a tight area for deflection. So I think if you just had it in a tight space, you wouldn't get the delivery for a deflection going in. It would just be gameplay. I
agree.
With a goal, with 1 or 2 goals.
One of the things I've done, I don't know if can you see my screen?
Yeah. No.
Well, I don't know if you can or not. Effectively, all I
you're there. Sorry, I can. Yeah.
I've just done a box like that. So I've literally just put a box in front of the goal that you're only allowed to score in, or you can limit where it is they can score. And then, as you say, you then need the pitch space to be able to allow for those balls in. If you play in a compact space, like you say, I think you don't get that delivery. I think if you end up with a bigger space, you can encourage that. Just as one thought.
Yeah.
But then it also depends on what sort of delivery you're working on as well. If we're working from deliveries from outside the D compared to entries from, say, a post up around the top of the D for deflections and lifts, and how we manipulate that maybe through a point scoring system. But obviously for space is quite important as well.
I think that's a really good point, because if you look at, if you deliberately doing that from, say, a long corner situation or a free hit in the 25 and you're looking at 3-way link up, then that's going to
be goals go in, and then you look at it again, you're like, well, he's literally just put a one-hand reverse stick tackle, dangled it somewhere near the ball to look he's doing his job.
Absolutely, yeah.
And again, in the league, it's similar to that as well.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it was interesting last year. The Germans were very happy to almost let you come into the D as long as a defender was with you, with literally sticking a step so they can take the ball off you as soon as you're trying to shoot. And then they just from the indoor. They love their going the floor to score, flicking sort of techniques, shall we say, a lot more. Certainly the one with that, yeah.
So linking that back to training, what would you do in training to kind of ingrain that principle of play into the game on the Saturday?
I've experimented with different parts of the D being almost segmented in certain times. There's no defenders allowed in that part of the D. In certain times they're trapped in different parts of the D. Defenders can stay in the space inside the circle better. And like only one person.
Rob, sorry, I've just got to jump in on your group, see how you're getting on. You're saying about using sort of unopposed areas in the circle. How do you keep those game realistic?
Well, it'd normally be so that it's not just the D here. There's a bigger pitch than just the D area, and a forward can receive that ball in that zone unopposed. If a defender's there, then it's a foul, and it's literally like touch and go. So the defender's got the option as well to, okay, if it's really too dangerous for me, I can actually give a foul away here. Or if I think I can defend it, I'm just going to let them receive it and then go from there. So it puts attackers in a favour, but they still have the option to contest it, if that makes sense in some way.
So it's just letting them receive, and then at the point that they're there, then it's engaged again.
No, so if they engage and make a tackle, then it's a foul, and then they'd have to be 3 yards or something like that, rather than a 5. If that makes sense. I've not explained that very well, probably.
Well, I get it. You're trying to ingrain certain behaviours and certain leads and certain timing and the rest of it to try and make that come out on a match day.
Yeah, it's more for sort of the deeper areas in the circle, to be honest, with that sort of thing.
Yep. Just to pick up something that Will said, and I think Elliot maybe reinforced it as well, around like D on D type games where the goals are really central. I think probably last year, in a couple of years, I've been like real big advocate of using that as a goal scoring method, because you get lots of shot, there's improvisation, there's rebounds and the rest of it. But I think the more and more I think about it, and more and more kind of do my practice, I probably use those kind of games less on the whole. I think there's probably less good outcomes in that kind of shooting environment than others. Not to say they're not valuable, and I still use them, and I think they still are good. But actually, how many times do you have an attack that's central, narrow, in those kind of areas? So we're exploring probably a bit more, not the triangle one that Elliot and Will put on, but just more looking at wider pitch shapes, because the majority of our D entries probably do come from like a baseline or shoulder type entry. And we look at, similar to what you're saying there, Rob, actually where do we want to be in the D as the ball comes in our more build phase type attacks, what the leads look like, if I'm carrying down the right baseline, where actually I want to clear out of that area. And that's probably going to score a goal more than being in an ugly zone and having a split grip and whatever, even though those goals are going to happen. But they're probably going to happen in maybe a one-sided de-entry type game. What are people's thoughts on that?
I've quite enjoyed doing a practice this year where basically you have, say, the goal in the normal position, and then the other two, you'd have 2 other goals, which would basically be the pitch would be 16 yards high, and then like the whole D width or the whole pitch width, and then you're basically getting loads of sort of that, like you say, baseline entry attacks or shoulder entry attacks. Because we get to long corners in a game, we just plough straight down the middle. But if all your practices are, like you say, goal to goal straight on, then they're going to go straight down the middle.
I understand what you're saying, Rob and Brett, but I quite like. So I think one advantage of goal to goal stuff would probably be the repetition and kind of like managing the chaos in the D. I think if you go goal to goal quite close together, for me, coaching a senior ladies team, they're quite messy inside the circle. So trying to get them to manage that chaos inside the circle is quite important for me, to try and get them to think clearly and execute the skill.
What are your thoughts so far, Rusty?
Top work on the breakout rooms, mate. Enjoyed it.
There's a big smile there.
A good format. I think you and Will are like who am I thinking of? Like it's like Dumb and Dumber. No, I'm joking.
No,
You're like
we called lots of things. Demi called us the Badil and Skinner.
Badil and Skinner. I like it. I love the way that every time Elliot asks you, Will, have you got anything to say? You just say no, and Elliot has to continue. Breakout rooms is a good feature. Well done.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Right, we're going to, well, I think people will start to filter back in now. At least you've taken something away, Rusty. That's what we want.
No, it was cool, although I'm worried about Ben. He's
back in the main room.
We lost Ben.
Some people dropped out, but we'll see. What are you eating, Husey? Anything nice?
It is a chicken and chorizo paella. It's pretty good. Yeah, don't tell the wife, but it's more like a risotto. But sorry, wife. Anyway.
She made it with you.
We had a good chat.
I'm gonna mute it again.
No.
We were in the middle of a conversation. You brought us back.
Well, you got the warnings. You have the warning.
Everyone's unmuted for a minute. Just chill, Will. Chill.
Bye.
We started with 54. We're now on 47, so we've lost a few along the way.
Fair enough.
Dylan, you're on my screen.
What were you doing in those groups for, Akasha?
I think we're all back in now, Will.
I've muted everyone.
Why?
Because we're going to ask certain groups for feedback, aren't we?
Okay.
Literally what we've just discussed.
Yeah, but it's not as fun as just picking on people that I can see on my screen and talking to them.
They can unmute themselves.
Can they?
Yeah.
Yeah, Manny's
Group
unmuted.
10, right. So I went into group 10 for a bit. There was some really good stuff in there. Would anyone from group 10 like to give some feedback to the group of what you were discussing, what your key points were? Don't all jump out at once.
Who's in group 10 now?
Who was it? Brett was there. Mike was there. Faz was there. Gary was there.
Right, come on, you can be spokesman here. Jump up.
Cheers, Susie. Thanks for speaking up and then nominating me. Yeah, no, good chat. We just touched on general goal scoring practices, then got into a bit more detail. I made the flippant comment that the Dutch women are very good. So Gary jumped in on me and kind of got me to think about why that was. We looked at loads of reasons. We got Rob to give us some thoughts from Germany and how they looked at goal scoring, the importance they place on certain things. It took us into a conversation around practice design, and we spent a bit of time going on goal games and probably where the benefits of that sit compared to other types of goal scoring. And we kind of echoed some of your thoughts in terms of this kind of managing chaos, being good in the chaos, desire, rebound type goals, but actually probably doesn't give you sometimes overly realistic goals in those situations too, the ones you're going to score at the weekend. And Hughes then come up and said about, does that maybe change a little bit week to week? So you're playing a team who's got some good deep defense. So would you work on something that week that's going to be, or going to, I don't know, promote different types of goal scoring, so work on different types of goal scoring in that week, while still sticking to your main principles around how you want to attack the circle and score goals in the circle, but being flexible within it. Again, everyone's context might be different because they might not have that week-on-week transition, may not know the opposition quite so well. So yeah, we spoke about if you want chaos, do you go, instead of goal on goal opposite each other, do you go based on sideline? So you've still got a bit of that chaos, but you've got more baseline type entries, you've got circle spacing, you've got other nice outcomes as well. Was that a fairly good summary, Mike? How do you think about that? There's a thumbs up.
I think there was an interesting point in there, Faz, talking about creating little unclosed areas which maybe give forwards or players in the attacking circle opportunity to experiment with different things in play as well.
Yeah, so Rob, do you want to jump in with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a great believer of the attackers are in control in the circle, and a lot of the time I feel like they rush it or force decisions, and they get the ball down to the baseline and just throw the ball away when they're in such a good position. So it's kind of making attackers realise they have far more time than they think at times, And yeah, like using unopposed areas where they can receive the ball and a defender has a choice. If they do make a tackle in there, then it's a foul and it's kind of just like a free hit inside the D. Defender has to get 3 yards sort of thing and play from there. But then also using that to get them to occupy different positions, which is mostly sort of in the deeper areas of the D, attacking or towards the baseline.
And I think we just mentioned off that as well. I think it's important. I guess picked up in your comment, Will, in box around your phase of your cycle. If you're lucky enough to have 2 sessions a week, what do those different sessions look like if you're looking at goal scoring? So we had a conversation around maybe one being more challenging, harder, more realistic, underloaded type goal scoring opportunity. Don't get as many reps in, but developing the skill of goal scoring desire. Whereas maybe the Thursday session being a bit more of a confidence booster, a few more overloaded situation where you're going to score more goals. You feel good going into the weekend, and how that maybe sits in with things.
Yeah, and I think as well within sort of a development of skill point of view, are you in a phase where you're allowing players to explore the environment more generally, or maybe a certain part of the environment and what opportunities they can create there? Also, are you saying this is how we're going to score our goals, and we're going to be much more rehearsal based? So we know that when we play this team, we can get onto the baseline and we can create opportunities because they're a little bit soft in terms of what they do between the P spot and goal. So we're going to look much more, put the magnifying glass much more on that side of the game for that period of time. And again, just being deliberate really with how you're setting things up.
That's the key word, isn't it? It is. It's being deliberate. It's understanding the extreme context of why you're doing what you're doing. Don't be afraid to be unopposed, but the unopposed practice needs to be realistic. Is that the wrong word? To make sure that we are practicing for a situation that we're probably going to come up against on at a weekend. Is goal scoring actually the process of teaching the forwards how to link with each other, and therefore the pass that leads to the goal shot is way more important than the goal shot itself? Are we then looking at set pieces? So actually goal scoring, we think about it, the good old fashioned 2-man drill, walking in and smashing it, great. But now break it back. Where are we winning the ball in the press? So where does this movement start? There's so many ways you can break it down, but goal scoring techniques, need to be honed, especially modern day techniques, and they'll keep on changing, depending on how teams defend. So I guess my 2 pence.
So I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think now Dieter's gone, I won't be to England hockey. I think the England hockey phrase around does it look like a game is really key, but I think that's stage 1, and I think what we're trying to get at in this whole process is what stage 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and how do you layer it? So actually, like you say, Mike, on a Saturday, Tuesday night looks just like Saturday, so the players and the girls and the boys feel it is game-like, and then they are rehearsing within the right environment. Should we go to a different group?
Yeah, go on, pick on a group, Elliot.
I'll just pick on a person who looks bored. Nathan Dyke. Hi, mate. You're muted, Nath.
Who's in our group 10?
I was in group 10.
Come on, know your groups, Elliot.
I was in
Job
group 10, mate. Brett's covered us.
Yeah. Shit, Rob. Bateman, come on then. You can't talk about rondos either. That's your constraint.
Yeah, we sort of spoke a little bit about getting into good habits and how you can get into those good habits more often. We didn't get quite as far into the discussion as Group 10 because we had a few video issues. But we sort of spoke about the body position being massive in the circle and how we can sort of create that, and then looking at linked movements as well, and then sort of looking to go at how we can create practices that link those movements a little bit more. But Capra had some good thoughts on one of the clips on having the confidence to be able to shoot at goal, but then it not being the person who shoots it actually scores it, and then how we sort of look at that really.
Cool. Do you want to nominate someone else?
I'm curious what Fletch has to say.
Can I just add in there I know we were talking about 1 minute 49 on your video clip elicits that behaviour really, really well. The backspace hit that she doesn't quite connect, but the other people in the D are expecting the shot rather than offloading it to someone else, as I think Kate was talking about. Over to you.
on, Fleck.
Yeah, we had a quick chat around how you'd set it up, what would your practice would actually look like around deflections, and having that space to kind of artificially create a bit of space that you could sling a ball in to deflect. And then it moved on to, do you have to have goalkeepers? Because someone in the chat before said, do you know what, we've only got 2 keepers down tonight, but we've got, I don't know, 20, 30 outfield players. So do you have some that are unopposed, build up the technique of deflections, and then put your goalkeepers in, and then look at how we have to lead to get there, what it feels like to be too far too close to a keeper, and positioning, and then ramping your goalkeepers up to make you attack better. So that was our kind of, some of our chat anyway.
Cool. Should we keep moving forward?
Can I say something quickly there, Al?
No.
If you want to work on rebounds, backspace shooting is a great place to start. It's especially with kids, especially with maybe guys who can't smash the living crap out of it. It's a backspace shot will fundamentally be a bobbler. Let's be honest, 9 times out of 10, and therefore it's a really nice way if you can build in some sort of backspace shot, which could be a pass from the baseline towards the top of the D or a roll by a coach. Then that strike, that first time strike, probably won't be perfect. So you're not only then building, real confidence in forwards to go, I can probably get in front of the goalie, if we're still allowed to be saying that. Or what's the rebound off the goalkeeper? So there you go. I'm going to mute myself again.
Yeah, I think within that as well, Mike, thinking particularly with younger players, think about the equipment that you use. So tennis ball, flyaway footballs, anything that can bobble around and cause a bit of chaos, would actually be easy to propel at goal, will start to shape the decision making and a bit of the body language in terms of getting over the line. But obviously, it's not really a hockey ball, but it's going to start to maybe give players a bit more of an idea, and particularly goal is dealing with that sort of chaos.
I'm conscious we've got 46 or 7 hockey-loving people in here, and not everyone has had chance to share. Is there anyone else that wants to share anything, or do you want us to roll on through?
Do you want to maybe ask Danny Crowther?
No. He's
No?
taking too long to respond.
What would you like to know, William?
The other side of it, really, I think goalies are obviously excellent for dealing with goal scoring. So what are your thoughts?
So something that I threw into our group was, and this is particularly like player pathway, we'll talk about golden thread and looks like a game, but lots of touches of the ball. And we can set things up that might be chaotic and give lots of opportunities for technical repetition within a game context for outfield players. But you can have a goalkeeper make a season's worth of saves in the space of 20 minutes if you were to look at the number of saves they make in match play situations. So just being conscious of what their focus is and having a conversation with them about, there's going to be lots going on in here. This is going to be chaos, but we're looking at a particular element from an outfield point of view, which might be the deflection. It might be the technical element around a certain type of goal scoring. There's going to be lots of build-up play that leads to it, but what are you going to focus on? And that can be a two-way conversation. So they might be saying it's about balance and perception of where the ball's about to go, who the threat is, their communication in key moments, and how they're managing critical moment marking situations. See the Poppy's put about goalkeeping, understand the role of outfielders. I think you can use your goalkeepers to be a bit of a coach. Ask them, like, what do you want your defenders to be doing, getting them feeding back, but equally saying, what does that then feel like for your defenders, for your attackers, eliciting some feel responses from your players around some of that will really help. Probably a bit of deeper reflection on some of the things that you've done in the session as well from everyone involved.
Yeah, again, some great stuff in the chat around that, Danny. Do we want to move on to zone?
Now, right, zone wise, we are going to. Huh?
Last slide first.
Oh yeah, thanks for your contribution.
You're welcome.
This is the overall plan, so working backwards first. So we're going to try and go into 3 groups at the end, so there'll be bigger groups for us to have a bit of a chat around. These sort of 3 topics. Hopefully you guys can decide where you want to go. We haven't quite worked out how we're going to get you there. So if you want to put room 1, room 2, room 3 in the chat, I imagine I can then try and do it. That's probably going to be the best way, I think. If you want to switch through, can we switch? Will? Anyone? No?
We can switch people through, but no, just pick one room, I think. But we can physically force them where they are.
Okay. So that's the outcome. That's what we're looking for, but we're going to try and get there through just explaining a little bit about zone. We're going to talk mainly about the why and, why would you choose zone, etc., as opposed to a man-to-man press. And we're going to try and give you a couple of variations of zone pressing that you can then have a play around with and we can discuss at the end. So, Will, why would you choose zone?
I think twofold. A lot of the time it can allow you to keep certain players on the pitch for longer. Man-to-man presses tend to have to use the forwards a lot more as workhorses. So I think when you win the ball, you're able to play forward earlier because you will win the ball in between layers of your team. So if I win the ball in here, I can immediately pass that forward player. So it allows us to start moving forward as a unit slightly better than man-to-man, which will tend to win the ball isolated a lot of the time. I'd also be thinking about where you're going to win the ball on the pitch, because with zone, we want people to go inside into pockets. We're going to win the ball in a more high-profile area on the pitch. Man-to-man, you tend to get a lot of winning the ball out wide, more often than not. And the other 2 things, promotes the opportunity to intercept quite well. So again, we're winning the ball in space. If we haven't won it in a pocket, we've intercepted. And also allows us to get multiple points of pressure to the ball. So if we collapse a pocket, we might be able to get 2, 3, 4 players in towards the person on the ball to win it, as opposed to in a man-to-man situation where it's generally 1 or 2.
Yeah. I've lost the PowerPoint.
Good.
There we go. So I think it's become a big mystery for a lot of people, and it's really not quite as difficult as maybe it's being made out to be, or it's a very popular thing, and we've had obviously a lot of debate around whether it is popular, whether it is a trend, etc. But it's not. People have been doing zone for years. House pressing, the Dutch have been doing that for years. I think Phil showed me that about 6 years ago at a Futures Cup camp, Future Sports camp, and zonal pressing has been around for a while, but obviously this whole new sort of emergence of it is quite interesting. So we'll try and talk you through a few examples now as to what you might see. So this is sort of a standard spine column zone. There's some people on here very much better versed than I am, but the idea being that we're playing in 3 columns and we're creating, as you can see on the screen, these boxes initially, and it depends how you set the column. So if we step it up and play spine up, you would end up with boxes as opposed to triangles. So boxes to try and win the ball. And again, just going back to the regains, the main types of regains are we're looking to intercept the ball, turn over the ball within inside the pockets, outside turnovers, and then looking to close and seal for the rest of them. So you'll see in a few of these examples coming up now, some different heights that it's set up at. So some people, the Belgians in particular, will set this up absolutely high up the pitch, and they almost forgo this man to keep him high, like Will said, so that we can step through. And that puts a lot of pressure, obviously, to try and win the ball high up. There's some teams that will try and set it up a bit lower down, but these all vary. And then try and keep an eye out as well for when the pockets become more diamond-shaped or triangle-shaped as opposed to squares, because of the way the spine moves up and down the middle of the press. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some examples here. I think what's key here is you can see this one is much narrower than the one we've just seen. So this is Russia versus Belgium, I think. And you can see how narrow they're keeping their channel, because that's up to them as to where they want to prioritise winning the ball, or where they don't want to allow the space to be for the attacking team. Key thing here for me is with Belgium, there's this massive sort of, these guys have got a very different responsibility to these guys because they're on the ball side of the pitch. So the ball is here. Their job here is to try and win the ball on the outside. Their job here is to split the middle of the pitch, and they are creating this space, a much bigger pocket in here than they have in here. So that obviously is encouraging and prioritising this player to try and play across, as opposed to playing here where it should be quite a high risk win for him, high risk trap. So now they can have a go and try and win the ball there. And they've managed to get a one-on-one on the outside. So here you can see they've stepped up, or he has certainly stepped up to try and step the press up a bit further. And then they're trying to win on the outside. With this sort of shape, with the boxes, it allows for different outletting patterns. So with the boxes, it allows for straight and sideways passes, as opposed to with the diamonds, which is going to encourage more diagonal passes in. On the flip side here, with 2-3-2-3 zone, the angles, again, they can't play straight passes now, but they can play on the diagonal. So the shape here is creating 4 lines, different jobs. So we've got diamond pockets here that are on a different shape, and that is trying to encourage different behaviours again from the players. What we have created instead, though, is these triangles, which means that we only can get 3-way pressure to the ball if they're within that, as opposed to 4-way pressure if they're sat on that seam. Does that make sense?
Can I jump in on that? I think this is where there's elements of zoning quite a lot of what people have probably done previously. If you think of sort of an old school sort of W press, I think people will find in that then the vulnerability is diagonal balls through it, but it will stop forward passes. So you'll start to see how triangles stop that central play but encourage that. So a sort of old school, what you might have done with kids at school yourselves quite regularly, I would imagine, is that W press that would shift along, whereas which has got a little bit of hybrid about it. It can be a bit zony at times.
So here's some examples. What's in the background?
Will, can I add to what you just said?
Yeah.
I think in American football they have an amazing ability to show one thing and do another, and they also have the ability to go man on man on one side of the pitch, and then they go zone on another side of the pitch. And it's something that you're absolutely right. The ability to show one thing and then actually play another thing and then regain structure was a real focus for us this year, to try and negate any easy aerial ball, basically. So you're absolutely right. It's how do we show one thing and play another, or then just show our full-on normal press, really. So
I think within that, Mike, I mean, when you talk about outletting versus pressing, a lot of outlet is trying to manipulate the opposition's shape, their press shape, to find forward outcome. If they can't identify what that press shape is, then it makes it much more difficult to manipulate it.
I think just a point here, just to add on this clip in particular, as you see the ball is passed left and then in, right, left and then in, it allows for different pressing angles. So here there is a pocket, but it's a very blind pressure that's coming in here, as opposed to, if I jump back to the slide here, if there is a player in the pocket that is a square pocket, I know I've got that up, but we'll leave it as that. The pressure that is applied is a different angle. So now that it's coming on, these guys are playing reverse pressure here. These guys are putting pressure on here. There is only so much blind pressure you can put on, whereas what we've just seen there is actually this guy is coming in totally blind to try and win the ball. So he has no idea where the pressure's coming from. That makes sense. So again, that can work in your favour if you're trying to deny certain players or certain areas of the pitch.
I think a lot of that man-to-man is you tend to only get pressure from one direction because you want to try and get people between the ball and your goal to clog up the space. So you get a lot of front-on pressure. You tend not to get the reverse pressure, which is a difference in zone.
The obvious thing for me just to add here as well is, particularly in these two presses, what you are looking at is if you watch the players, all they're focused on is ball. So obviously they're aware of the men that are around them, but they're focused on the ball. Whereas with man-to-man, you end up with players being totally focused on man or somewhat focused on man, which then creates a dilemma for them in the sense of, oh, there's a ball there to intercept, but where's my man? There's a question to be asked. Whereas when they are focused in zone, priority number one becomes, can I intercept and gain the ball, regain the ball? Moving through here, just to look at sort of a deep zone, deep half. Again, this is sort of nothing new. We've had half-court press around for years with man-to-man and zone. What this is doing, obviously, is condensing the defensive lines, so you get lines as opposed to being spread out over a three-quarter pitch. The pockets become a lot smaller, so it means there's a bit of a difference in the sense of where we can regain the ball, we can get pressure to the ball a bit quicker, and hopefully there should be less open passing lanes to intercept, more open passing lanes for the intercept. I think this is Australia, and this was only a very brief half, and then they jumped straight to a full man-man. There's some very good clips of them if you are looking on changing presses throughout, and they're playing in their column zone still, but in a half court almost, or as a half shape.
That's a good point from Ralsei around sort of group understanding and sort of shared awareness of affordance, I think, within pressing, but and a big difference, which I'm sure Group 1 will probably touch on, between man-to-man pressing and zonal pressing, where there's a shared responsibility in zone. So in terms of creating a really positive atmosphere and not a blame culture in a team, zone actually scaffolds that quite well as a defensive way of playing.
And to offer a name drop, when we had Max Caldas appear on our TCP course for a couple of hours, one of the things he said about switching to zone was that it gave his players more responsibility, like you just said. So he changed the Dutch guys to zone because he wanted to change the culture within the team to being more team orientated rather than man and blame. So, you know, at a top level, he's doing that to try and encourage those behaviours. So it just shows how powerful it can be.
I'll just jump in. Crowd has made a point around zone in deep defence. For those of you that may have watched Belgium in the Euros last summer, they did a particularly interesting deep 4-4-2 zone in their own 23 and went to a 4-4-1 zone when they went down a man, deep defence. it was quite interesting to watch.
So this is 4-4-2 zone, I call it, but you can sort of call it whatever you want, I guess. It could be a 1-3-4-2, but I've used this particularly with my girls at school this year, and they've absolutely loved it. And the reason that I think it's quite effective, particularly for younger or youth players to learn, is you get these different pockets. So you end up with this triangles as well as squares. So they get to practice a little bit of both. So for example, as this is moved up pitch, it fits quite nicely with the half-back and the centre-backs, etc. So it stops any forward passing from the centre-back because you've got a centre-forward. So we play it quite high up, for example. It stops any forward passing because you've got two centre-forwards opposite their half-back, their centre-backs. And then you end up with this pocket of three players who can then go and put pressure on the half-back. And it's quite risk-free because obviously you've got 3 against 1. So it's quite a good way to really encourage them to develop their understanding in zone. Whereas I think if you're to look at, that's a rubbish example, the column zone, the issue if you jump straight in with youth players here is obviously they can play from A to B quite quickly. So it becomes quite high risk for them. Whereas, as I say, I've had quite good success with this year. They've really understood it and giving some different priorities here. So we'll go to the video in a second. But main roles here are we've got a pocket of 4 to try and win the ball. We've got triangles to try and put pressure and win the halfback off a 3. And then these guys' job becomes to seal the holes behind these two. So they've got a really clear understanding of what's ahead of them.
What's up?
All right, can you see that video?
Yeah.
So here you've got 2 high forwards, flat 4 midfield, and then 3 or 4 in behind in a sort of diamond shape. And again, this is Russia Dragons, I think. Definitely need some electric music for these videos next time.
You could sing, Elliot.
I'm all right. Is Gibson still here?
Yeah.
Because you're very good at explaining it, I'll pull up in a second column zone boxes. Can you run your priorities of what people do? You're very good at explaining it, and it's better than I would do.
Okay.
In a minute.
Very quiet, Gibbo.
I've just been. It's good to listen.
He's having a nap as normal.
I was going to say it's probably nap time.
So,
No, I've kept my my post.
Can you do it in the style of Jodie Paul as well, please?
You do your
Is
Rusty.
Jodie on the chat?
Jody's not on the pool. Rusty is though, and he wants to.
No, but I've seen the recording buttons on, so I won't be doing that.
So if you, I know we spoke about this when we worked at Dice last year. So let's say this pocket on the left, man in pocket receives ball. Go, or do you want to?
Yeah, so there'd be in a zone. You talk about getting 3-man pressure to the inside. There'd be three distinct jobs. So the player that Elliot's curse is on now would ideally be back pressure and be the first player in. Their job would be to stop them playing forward and try and limit what the player on the ball actually does and try and steer what the player on the ball actually does. If Elliot jumps to centre forward, please, Elliot, that player would come in as a side pressure and actually try and box off the help side of the pitch, ideally, so keeping the player on the ball on the short side of the pitch, and the winger, or you could go with the midfielder, but the winger to say that, hi, please, yeah, they would come in and be sort of front pressure or nose pressure and actually engage in winning the ball. So zones go wrong, and the risk where they go wrong is if back pressure, the first player comes flying in, doesn't delay, commits a foul as we're getting 3 people around the ball, there's a cheap free hit and the player on the ball eliminates 3 players within 5 on a free hit.
Can I ask a question there, Gibbo?
Yeah.
There's a lot of focus there on what's going on the ball side.
Yeah.
What the as the box collapses, what's happening with the support?
Yeah, you'd like the help side to get across and cover critical passing lanes. If, say, the player on the ball just chuck the ball away as response to pressure, you wouldn't want them to get success from that. So taking the critical passing lanes of players in behind or on the help side and getting across into interception positions or actually starting to mark wouldn't be a bad thing as the zone's active there.
I think a really key point is actually you can mark, and as long as you're aware of what's around you, you can take up a player and that might deny a whole option, a whole passing lane.
Yeah, and keeping that zone can stay alive for quite a period of time. You don't have to win the ball in 2 seconds. It can be, they can move all the way to that sideline. They can move back towards the centre-backs without fouling, without actually winning the ball. But it can stay active for quite a period of time. And the jobs aren't always prescribed. So if the player turned out another way, actually back pressure might have to come from somewhere else. Front pressure would have to come from the winger potentially. But it's about being adaptable. But there's a rudimentary way of covering it.
So here,
hello?
Sorry, here that was a background noise.
Can I change tack slightly and just ask Kappa to talk about the flip side of that? So the outlet through or against the zone. So as you've got someone receiving in there, what are you trying to achieve with them if you're outletting?
Sorry, I'm taking the mute. So from the outlet point of view?
Yeah, so Gibbo's there talking about the collapsing. How would we be playing against a team that's trying to do it?
So again, it's in my mind, it's about making use of the collapse and then using the space. So if you get a team that doesn't have those people in the outside lanes collapsing and cutting off, as Gibbo quite rightly put, making use of the sort of passing lanes and the space that's there. Once you've got them collapsed, if you bounce the ball out, then there should be plenty of room to play through many channels that have opened up. And it's about manipulating them to collapse and then waiting for people to forget their roles and jobs and then play through in the sort of small unit play.
James Bateman, thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of principles of how you can play through a zone. You can either go quickly before they can set up, you can use the overhead, and then also just playing with numerical supremacy, so just picking a side that you're going to play down and just play with more numbers. So you can just pass through a zone that way. But I think the aerial is one that's been used a little bit more in international hockey just because of the quality of player. And I think it's changed of what an aerial is now because of the 5 metre rule and how you can use that. It's no longer just try and throw an aerial as far as you possibly can. It's a little one-man accurate aerial is a really good way of breaking down zones.
I think as well, I mean, there's the ball in the top using the 5 metre rule. There's what Phil said in terms of using their aggression to collapse as a way of creating space to play around somewhere else. I think also being brave enough, being brave enough to receive on the seam. So if we've got our 4 players here, we've got 4 players here, and that's the zone that they want you to play in, and that's us receiving. If we receive right in the middle of the zone, it makes it easy for them to get the pressure on from all sides. Whereas if we just have a little bit more confidence, both in terms of our ability to receive there under pressure and our player passing in, if we can trust and receive on the pocket, on the seam of the press, then actually our receipt of the ball coming in eliminates all of them altogether, and it forces the position of that pocket to change. If I'm hanging back there, they're either going to drop back to create a pocket slightly deeper, or move and cut out the line of the pass to me. So again,
you've also got to think about the length of the pass as well. If it becomes too long in terms of coming from a full back into a midfielder, if that's over a bigger distance, it gives the players in the zone
cheat as well.
Zones cheat. Yeah, I was waiting for that.
There we go.
It's not cheating, is it?
No.
You're starting to move, but you're starting to preempt at distance, aren't you? So
No, it's the best zonal teams won't stay in those shapes, won't stand in lines, won't stand in pockets. The players are doing what's required of them in those moments. So if someone's standing on the seam, one of those two back defenders will move in if they know what they're doing. If they've been told to stand in a shape, then they're going to be vulnerable to that kind of thing. But if you're telling them to check their shoulders and react to where the situation is, if your guy's on your right shoulder, take a step to your right, block it. You don't need to stand in those exact lines. It's more about your feel, and basically everyone on the pitch is like a sweeper. What you feel is the right thing to do is the right thing to do.
I think as well within that, Jim, it doesn't have to be the back seam necessarily. It could be the outside seam that you receive to take it and then play down the sideline. But just the movement of you to hold that position start to manipulate the press. So it starts to force them to occupy different areas or to come and be slightly more aggressive and, as I say, sort of step up and pressure that receive, which maybe creates opportunity somewhere else.
I think people are starting with this or trying to teach it, get a little bit fixated on a shape rather than the purpose of what they're trying to do. So as Jimmy just said, narrowing the back of the press to deal with that person that's hanging deeper on the seam. It's just, well, that's what you're trying to achieve, that whether you're closer to intercept or actually deal with the person receiving it. But you can't just take up a shape if that's what you've been told. It's about creating a trapping zone that actually works for your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk with kids at school, actually. We tried it with under 14s this year, which has been quite interesting about incentivizing or pressurizing people into those traps. So are we going to have an aggressive centre forward who's splitting and chasing the ball almost into the press? Or are we just using a more open front and slightly narrower back to incentivize them in with space?
I think that's where, Phil, I think the priorities comes in again, doesn't it? Is for me, with zone, can we intercept the ball is key in a lot of it. Obviously, we want to try and get pressure on the ball. For me, I prioritise interception and then outside pressure, and then inside pressure is more about denying the space rather than trying to trap and win it. So if you say, if it goes on your outside channel, go and murder the man that's there, that's using a nice term. Or otherwise, you're looking to, like you say, intercept and hold shape. And like Jimmy said then, it's definitely not about the shape that you take up, but can you then do that within the position you put yourself in?
I think it links to what Hughes just put on the group chat there as well, around actually the different shapes the zone might get into, but then how you manipulate that as a player. So it might be that you want to see, it might be that you just go towards one player in that zone and eliminating or manipulating that player to get it out somewhere else. So it could be in the middle, could be in the side, could be in the back. It's being deliberate in where you position yourself.
You can talk there as well, Brett, can't you, about leads for me and leads for my mate. So leads for me will be me trying to receive the ball in a good position. So I'd probably want to lead behind a defender or not give them as much visual awareness of where I'm going, so that I've still got the element of surprise. But if I'm trying to manipulate an opposition shape more, it would be leads from a mate. So I'll make it really obvious, run in front of the defender, maybe give them a nudge as I go past them to really get them interested in me, to see if we can take them from a zone role to actually getting a bit more involved in a man-to-man shape, which could completely disrupt what they're doing.
Well, I agree with Gibbet. Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, Mike. I was going to say, actually, it was linking to a point you spoke about earlier, actually, Mike, which was if you're outletting against the zone, and let's say you take James's point and you look to try and get numerical supremacy and basically play small unit play and outnumber them on our side. Do you really want to be? I think we probably in this country, we lead too much in zones. The guys who are maybe playing screens in those front boxes, a really good way to take away a lot of those triggers, those anticipations, maybe that Rusty's asking about in the chat. It's just to stand there. You know, if you just occupy a space and occupy a box, so the guys in without really giving them triggers, it enables you to change your shape, to be able to then get that numerical supremacy down one side or the other side. but I think in this country we lead too much for the ball, and then we give loads of triggers to the defence about when to press. You know,
I think that
you
you
just
lead
get
in
stand there.
isolation as well, don't you? So you end up leading to try and get on the ball, and it's very hard then to encourage that second phase lead of I'm leading to get Will on the ball rather than me on the ball, and then I'm going to score the goal because I'm on the penalty spot. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and then a lot of the time, especially when it's outletting, the guys are leading from distance and they're asking for passes from too far away, and then if they're on a diagonal, you're just asking to get it intercepted, aren't you?
There's also, I mean, and we can talk about basics in here. There's having good quality passing ability and receiving ability, because otherwise that's when zone really comes into itself, because it's going to try and cause interception, and it's going to put pressure on receipt in numbers. So if you can't secure the ball and you can't pass the ball with good quality, then you are going to be in trouble. That's probably a different conversation.
Just to be the boring one and move us on, I've assigned most people to groups. There's some people that haven't written, or I can't see it on the chat. So if I hit open all rooms now, what it should do is take everyone that said what they wanted to their room, and then the rest of you I'll just assign manually, I think.
Is it worth saying you're going to be in room 1? That might obviously get rid of some people out of that one.
You'll be in room 3.
I'll be in room 3. So room 2, it'll be a bit of a free-for-all. So it's much more a discussion forum as we had earlier, but there's a bigger group. Talk about what's going on now, really.
Thing, but I'd like some better ideas of how to implement it rather than just saying your aim is to just keep this.
Yeah, I mean, my players are under 14 pathway players. I've only got about 4 of them, so the rest are still learning. So it's not something that I've tried to teach them zonal system, and I don't go to the badges and matches on a Saturday either. So yeah, I'll be interested to know some quick, easy wins and how to coach it. Or get also need something.
I was just going to say that I have to admit I'm a bit of a convert. I've been having played half decently years ago. We played 3/4 or half court, and I'm at the same club as Phil, so have somebody to talk to about it. And it just put the fear of God into me not having forwards marked. And it was just going through my head of, well, we're going to make a mistake because that player can't do this and they're not switched on, etc., etc. And having watched the men do it last year without Phil, and to varying degrees of success. And then this year we implemented it at Christmas, and it was actually Phil took the ladies out to the Isle of Man, and they chose to do this press. And I said to them, "What do you want to tell me?" And that's what they elected to do, and it just worked so much better because the shape is there. If you have a shape, and I know what just talked about don't have a set shape because it then puts people into pigeonholes and forces decision making based on the shape rather than what they're seeing. But allowing them to just create those pockets and just go with what happens has actually been a bit of a revelation. And now it's so obvious when I look at it because I have overload of numbers all the time on the ball.
If I just add to I think so. I coached there in regional Premier League, and we started this year I've had him for 3 years. This is the 3rd year, and started it this year to stretch them. And by playing, we played the column zones to start with, and we basically just messed around with where the middle spine went. And like you say, the difference that there's a massive period. Like, don't get me wrong, some of the videos I could show you from them losing centre back to centre forward, and then the centre forward putting it in the goal, and then we're all stood there going, "What's going on?" It's really hard work, but like you say, it allows the players to individually play to their strengths. So if they're I play in the team a lot of the time, and I'm not a quick forward, so I go and really hassle the centre backs, and that's my job. That's what I'm good at. Whereas there's other centre forwards who are really happy to reverse pressure and win the ball. That allows me to play to my strength and allows them to play to their strengths. If that makes sense. So it's such an individualised thing. Whereas with man, that's my guy, and I get told don't mark him. What have you found, Rob? So no, it makes total sense. I agree as well. What have you found with Surbiton Ladies 2s, Rob? So obviously you've got quite a young group.
I mean, they're far more resistant to give it a go initially. Our ladies ones play with a zone, so as the ladies twos, we try and play exactly the same way as them. But it's a lot more of a challenge. I think you have to kind of view the zone to start with and kind of set it to them with just in a small area, and especially like as the pressing. So we try and say win the ball classically at left half or sort of our right midfield pocket, and sort of that's more of a zonal thing as in terms of the midfield and forwards, and to make the defenders more comfortable, they can be more man orientated. I think, but by nature, when you're in unstructured play, it automatically becomes zonal. So I think you'll be surprised that actually zonal sort of defending happens a lot more than you think it does. It doesn't need to be this specific structured and organised zone.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that like when you play a 3/4 man, obviously the front three are in zone most of the time, and you've got a spare who's in zone. So like you say there, I think if you can put pressure, I like putting pressure on the halfbacks and trying to say, right, we're going to go and pocket the sideline and win it there, particularly with girls, younger girls. They find it a lot easier to understand, right, the ball's there, we're going to go and win it, as opposed to trying to collapse a pocket and then the rest of the time they're just looking to intercept.
Yeah, and for me, the big thing that I kind of tried to emphasise is that when the ball gets past the sideline, for example, we want to be covering only 2/3 of the pitch. Everyone shifts across and everyone shifts up, and we kind of create this overload. And that was kind of the biggest principle. If we keep it to one side, we keep it to one area, and we stay compact. It wasn't kind of talking about specific roles of you do this and that, because I think if you start explaining to many players initially what Gibbo was talking about with the 3 different lines of pressure, some may get it, but some will go straight over their head.
Yeah.
And understanding what you have to do against them is effectively going to be your success or not, especially if people can throw not just meaty aerials but accurate ones now at different heights. It's changing the game, and it's interesting to watch those analysis from behind the goal and look at it the way the fullbacks would look at it. You're not almost talking about coverage now, like I say, like an American footballer.
Yeah, I think all the chat when Elliot was doing his little speech was all about playing into a pocket and playing through the pocket. But the reason that yourselves are so good is that it's the role of the fullback. It's for me, it's as simple as that. That's what we focus on at OGs. And if you're playing against a man press, then you just overload one side, you send your right back off, and right, Mr. Fullback, start running. The reason it's so difficult to play against Surbiton at the moment is that you play with 3 fullbacks. You can call them what you want, but it's when you outlet with 3 centre backs, that's a real problem against a zone. And in the same sense, if you've only got 2 fullbacks, then I guess the importance for us is definitely looking at how can one of those fullbacks manipulate a pocket. Can they go and stand next to the right? If fullback goes and stand next to their left forward, then you're creating a numerical overload straight away. So, yeah, I think it's all about, as you say, you call them a quarterback, call them the fullbacks, but they're super important here.
Why, Mike? Why is it hard to play against 3?
I think because I don't know. I was going to say ask Jimmy. Ask him how it came about. I chatted to Perny about this, and he said it was because they were worried about counter defense. But I think if you have by having double width and 3 fullbacks, by having width on both sides and effectively playing a 5 at the back or 3 fullbacks and then and 2 wide people, you lose another player up front, but they've got quite a good centre forward, so you can deal with that. And then you open up a lot of space. You have to make a decision. Do you close the middle and then open up the outside pockets? Or do you close the outside pockets and then open up the middle?
That's what I was trying to lead you to, is I think for me, I totally agree with your point. Playing with the 3 causes lots of issues, but also because the 3 sits between the columns almost, so they can still play straight as opposed to on the angle. And then you can gain the outside players by playing with 5. And if you vacate the middle of the pitch, you're asking a massive question, aren't you, of the pockets? Are they going to stay narrow in the middle and allow you to play down the outside, or are you going to stretch it and then you create the space in the pockets that you want?
And I guess the strength with Surbiton is they have good players in those pockets. So not very many teams in the country will have those, strong players both at fullback and in the pockets and on the outside, and they're set up in a really nice way. So those three players. It makes it really, really difficult for the centre forward to try and split one side as well. And the forwards are dumb at the best of times. So when they try and cut the pitch in half and actually try and keep the ball one side, they always end up running to the wrong players. So against the three. Sorry, there you go. That's our experience. Jimmy, any thoughts?
No. Two things really. I think, as you alluded to, when you're trying to promote a halfback, it's better in a man-to-man against a man-to-man system. I think the halfbacks are less relevant. Less relevant in a zonal system, because you can just leave or fill that space with any player. It doesn't need to be the halfback. Equally, three at the back allowed us just to have another player up front. Which means we want to try and play forward, so we've got somebody else in that forward space. So instead of instead of not using our non-ball halfback as much, that player is now up the pitch. So we're trying to create more overloads higher up, I guess.
Would you offset that three, Jimmy? Would they be pretty central? So would you play more, advocate more on the right or something like that?
It's up to them. It's dynamic. They do like to offset. Different personnel prefer to offset. Some are prefer to stand central, but against different teams that we've been a little bit more prescriptive on certain spaces to leave. But most of the time they make the choice.
Time is coming up now. Do we want to continue, or should we go back into the main room?
I've got to go on.
Sorry, Phil, you can't.
When it feels going.
All right, no worries. Well, yeah, we're going to go back into the main room in 60
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, Phil.
Bye, Phil.
No, his facial hair is terrible. Oh, he's still here.
I don't know how to leave.
Come on, Phil, you're tech savvy. To be fair, I don't know how to leave. I'll leave breakout room. Bottom right, Phil.
Return.
A lot of people have had to leave, obviously, because we're now over 2 hours, which is mental in itself. Proves how much we're all enjoying ourselves.
The other constraint was talking about with my group down in the chat. So encouraging minimum time in possession of the ball before you can use the ball will also create that carry, maybe in a space that you can collapse around. Well, I would just say thank you to everyone for coming. I mean, it's been great to have so many people that can break up into these little groups and explore different things. Elliot, are you going to send out a follow-up sheet of ideas that people might want to do another meeting on?
I'm not going to do anything tonight, but I'll definitely try and do something tomorrow.
And then the plan really was to leave this open now as a free chat, or we could possibly even create a few groups for people to go off into if we wanted, or